We just finished 2 weeks of work in the Maritime Museum and in the Museum Rotterdam, which are 2 municipal museums in Rotterdam, which means that they are quite different types of locations. The things on display is really of a more historical nature than an artistic one. It made me reflect much more about the site specificity of a museum. So, for instance, in Museum Rotterdam, the room where we were spending the most time was in the center of the building, and the architecture of that room was quite appealing because, well, it's an open space, and you can see the offices which are surrounding this open space in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th floor. And these are administrative offices that don't belong to the museum. So there are people working for the municipality which are working in these offices, and the walls are transparent, so they can look down into the museum from the outside. When I work in a black box in a theater, I work site-specifically. Even if this room is a standardized room, I have to work site-specifically because each room is different. I'm realizing now that the same goes for these projects. I am of course working with the context of the museum at large, but because I'm moving from venue to venue, I have to treat each location as site-specifically as I'm thinking about the theater venues that I'm used to working in. In this week we worked on finding strategies to make invitations, basically, and how that invitation is being made, whether it's through an announcement, through an agreement, verbal, spoken, written, or if it's simply an unwritten contract, for instance through a game or a score, or a situation which is familiar and is easy to read based on social contracts. So we used this game as a starting point to compose, to start to craft a little miniature composition, which could be used as one of the ways to interact with a potential audience or to invite them to participate. We started to explore ways to communicate non-verbally, and we realized that this game functions quite well because the rules are inscribed in already the form or the composition of that game. It's very recognizable as it contains its own explanation almost. This made me come back to the fact that audience participation is not only about making an audience member move their body or activate them in some way that would be very voluntary or a very superficial way to think of ways to engage with something. It seems important for me that the way that we introduce our proposal through an invitation or an announcement, the benefit of doing that has to do with providing the surplus for the participant to know what's going to happen. It's about relieving the participant of the stress of having to think of the practicalities of the logistics. If you get a pop-up intervention in your face when you didn't expect it, the surprise can be fascinating, but the actual experience can be very colored by a lot of questions that have not so much to do with the actual experience, but more with what is going on, what is going to happen next, how long is this going to last, do I have time for this, do I want to accept this, do I want to reject it, how should I accept this? All of these questions that can kind of interfere with the artistic experience. So we discovered some benefits of the clarity of an announcement. Audience participation is just as much about installing a curiosity and possibly facilitating an attention for something in particular. And this game was a very a good example of how that attention was installed and then potentially unraveled into something else of a more choreographic nature.